The second thing that they found, this gets a little bit more advanced, so we're going to go into an advanced vocal tip here, is that the doctors who used the lowest end of their natural voice tone were rated as the highest in competence. Now, I don't mean that the male with the lowest baritone did best, so it wasn't the man with the lowest voice did best. For both men and women, when they use the lower end of their natural voice, we could hear that competence and confidence. And the reason for that is because when we are tense, our vocal cords tense, oftentimes our body tense, we creak in our shoulders. And when we do that, we create vocal fry and our voice goes higher into our range. So right now, for example, in this workshop, I'm working really hard to keep my voice in my lowest natural range. Whenever I hear myself go a little higher in my range, I make sure I take a deep breath and I speak on the out breath. You might recognize this idea from, yes, I wanted to explain how this works. So when we have tension, we can hear that tension. It comes through our lungs, our vocal cords, our throat, our mouth, our ears. So that is the reason we are constantly listening for someone to be a little bit lower in their range. Is when we hear any tension, it creeps up into our voice where we go higher, or we hit vocal fry. So when we're really anxious or nervous, we often have vocal fry where we have that kind of sizzling bacon sound. And that really drives us crazy because we can hear that anxiety and we don't like it, right? So the moment we hear that, we go, ooh, it's like fingers on a chalkboard, because we know that signals, there's anxiety and we don't want to catch it, right? We don't want to catch someone who's in low anxiety. So here is a great clip. So Margaret Thatcher, former Prime Minister of the UK, she struggled with having her voice heard. And Laurence Olivier, the famed actor, trained her to use the lower end of her natural range. Before he trained her, she often spoke in the higher end of her range up here. And he said to her, if you speak up here, no one will take you seriously because it's too high in your range and it sounds like you're anxious. And so he actually trained her to work to lower her voice. So here are two clips, one before her training and one after. And I just want you to listen to the different pitches. Both sound like her, but one is clearly higher in competence and it makes you pay attention. So we listen to two of those clips.
I've been so busy that I haven't had really much time to think about it. After all, I know I'm still only me, and so do my family. But I'm very much aware of the responsibilities and a little bit apprehensive. Who wouldn't be when you think of the names that I follow?
Let me answer that very deeply, because I feel very strongly about it. The greatest divisions this nation has ever seen were the conflicts of trade unions towards the end of a Labour government.
So you can hear both of these clips, same person, both sound like her, but one she's using the higher end of her range, one she's using lower. What I want us to think about is, when are you speaking in your lower range and when are you speaking in your higher range? And this is for both men and women. When we speak in our higher range, it signals low competence and low confidence. And the easiest way that we can lower our range, if you ever hear yourself go higher into your range, is to take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, right? The more space that we have in our body, the more we're likely to go into our natural range. There's a reason I'm standing for this presentation. I find personally that I can speak in my lower range if I'm standing. When I'm seated, I have a little harder time getting vocal power from my diaphragm. So I stand for my presentations. Here's the other way that I hear this happen, is I hear that people often, their highest vocal range on an entire video call or entire phone call is, hello, all the way up here. And that is because people often take in their deep breath and they say hello at the very top of their range, or on a vocal call or on a video call, they'll say, hey everyone, good to see you. They start up here and they go down here. So if you want to try this with me, you can. I want you to, and if hopefully you're alone, no one can hear you do this, but if not, ask them to join in. So I want you to practice hearing the difference. So I want you to take a deep breath in and say hello on the top of your range. So hello. It will actually be harder to get volume. You'll want to put your chin up and you go all the way up here. And the more that you speak up here, the more you'll get vocal fry and run out of air. So that is when we are most nervous. Unfortunately, that's where we tend to go. We hold our breath, we tilt our chin up, and we try to speak like this because we're really anxious and we just want to be heard. And that makes us sound even more low competent. Now I want you to take a deep breath in and I want you to say hello on the out breath. So this is the in breath. Hello. This is the out breath. Hello. So I'm the same person, right? But those two hellos sounded totally different. And we give off totally different impressions in just the way that we answer our phone, just the way that we say hello on video. So a couple things for us to think about, some power phone tips, by the way, video calls and in person as well. Of course, we should be doing these in person even more. Always breathe out on hello or your opening line, right? So whatever your opening line is, don't say it up here. Don't say it up here, say it down. Second, a really, really powerful challenge, if you're willing to do it. I know this is physically painful. If you could go listen to a previous recorded phone call, so maybe your end of a pitch or a presentation or your end of a Zoom call, I want you to listen for every time you accidentally use the question inflection. So every time you accidentally go up instead of saying your sentences down. You can also listen to anytime you go a little higher in your range. A really easy way to do this is if you want to upload your audio track to a software like GarageBand, you can see actually when you go high into your range. That's another really easy way to identify it. You might notice that you use the highest end of your range at the very beginning, so your first impression, and also in your most nerve-wracking parts of your presentation. We can often give away our most nerve-wracking parts when we go up into our high range. If you have prices, timelines, hard news, I want you to practice delivering them with a downward inflection and a nice low tone. That's how we get people to doubt us less, dismiss us less, and question us less. All right, I want to make sure I have time for verbal charisma. So we talked about vocal. Our words also, of course, matter so much in our communication, especially as we are now sending more emails, more Slacks, more texts, more chats. We're using more typed communication than ever before. Before I teach you some of the verbal cues and verbal communication tips, I want to play a little game, or I want to tell you about a game that was played in the lab. So what they did here in this experiment is they had people come into their lab and they had them play a game. One group of participants was told they were going to play the community game. The second group of participants were told they were going to play the Wall Street game. Now, these games were exactly the same. The lab was the same, the experimenter was the same, everything was exactly the same about these two experiments, except the name that they mentioned to them upon first playing. So you're going to play the community game, you're going to play the Wall Street game. Do you think this made a difference in how they played? So much. So in the Wall Street game, it was kind of a prisoner's dilemma kind of game. 1/3 of participants shared their profits, whereas in the community game, 2/3 shared their profits. Now, this is incredible, right? This is one word swap, one word switch, same game, but just that one word swap, that positioning changed the way those players cooperated and collaborated. We don't realize that we are constantly cueing people with our words on how they should cooperate and collaborate. There are so many studies on this. I talk about so many of them in the book, but just a few to convince you. When people read words like fast, speedy, and young, they walk more quickly. When people read words like polite, kind, and easy, they interrupt people less. So even just reading the word polite makes you more polite. When people read words like collaborate, they are more likely to be collaborative. That is because, especially now more than ever, we are constantly searching people for cues on how we should act. We use cues to set ourselves up for success. So if we hear someone say, oh, we're going to collaborate today, our brain literally begins to get ready to collaborate. When participants heard we're going to play the Wall Street game, they got competitive. They got tough, like they think they should be on Wall Street. When people heard they were going to be in the community game, their brains went, oh, community, okay, collaborative, trustworthy, I'm going to work with people. And that's our brain's way of trying to predict our own behavior and set ourselves up for success. The problem is we are constantly missing opportunities to do this. I feel that so much of our communication has gone sterile, where in our email communication, in our written communication, even in our verbal communication, we have removed any and all verbal cues that help us. So I used to send emails like this all the time. We're all set for the meeting next week. I'll prepare an overview and sample proposal for you to look at. Then we can review them. Let me know if you have any questions. Now, this email does the job, but it is completely sterile. There are actually no cue words in this at all. There's no words that we can grasp onto for how we should think, act, and behave successfully. The next slide is exactly the same word count, but I've swapped out a couple of the words. Remember, this is the same word count. This is not about necessarily more words. It's about choosing better words. So I'm looking forward to collaborating next week. I'll prepare a goal worksheet and overview of desired outcomes for both of us. We can work through everything together. Happy to answer any questions. This has the same point, but it feels different. When people are reading words like happy or together, they are more likely to feel and prepare to be happy together. The master level aspect of this is we can use our verbal cues to match where we want to be on the charisma scale. So if you are higher in warmth and you want to be higher in competence, you should be using more competent words. If you're higher in competence and you want to increase your warmth, you should be using more warm words. So this is a little bit art, not as much science, right? It's hard to dictate exactly what words cue, but the warm words I've chosen are words like that give the warm and fuzzies. So when you're writing an email or you're communicating verbally, warm words make people feel connected, collaborative, likable, trustworthy. So words like friends, connect, cheers, open, together, excited, collaborate, those are all warm words. Versus competent words are the opposite. Competent words make us feel like we can get stuff done. They make us feel motivated. They make us feel productive. So productive, brainstorm, effective, power through, efficient, lead, knowledge. Those are words that trigger our sense of motivation. We can often tell where someone is going to put themselves on the charisma scale based on the kind of words they use in their emails. So if we open up their email sent folder and we count the number of warm words versus competent words, we can almost always accurately predict where their colleagues will put them on the charisma scale. And that's because oftentimes our cues leak even into our verbal communication. The single fastest way that we can increase our charisma is we can use a balance of both warm and competent words. This also happens all the time in little hidden verbal opportunities. So this is a typical calendar, right? My calendar has one-on-one, afternoon, available, lunch meeting. I think so many of the words we use, even in our calendar, we've heard a million times before. So they just get us ready for boring, right? We hear the same call, meeting, conference, one-on-one overview. What if we took our calendar invites and we began to think about how we want to use warmth and competence, how we want to set people up for success? Could we use titles like collaborative session, goal meeting, creative time, 2022 wins? The goal with these, by the way, is to simply be purposeful, that we're thinking about what do we want to set people up for? How do we want to cue their brain to be their best selves when we actually show up for that meeting? What I like to think about is, how do I want someone to feel when they open my email in their inbox? How do I want them to feel when they see my calendar invite in their calendar? How do you want someone to feel before, during, and after interacting with you? Can you gift them or give them the cues that can help them feel that way? Another really specific way to think about this is, what are the first 10 words you say in a video call, in an in-person interaction, in an email, on Slack in the morning? A lot of times, accidentally, we set ourselves up for negative cues. So we say things like, oh, I'm so sorry I'm late. I've been so busy. Oh, my schedule's been crazy. I've been so stressed. What terrible traffic. The weather is awful. I'm so sorry I'm late. The problem is, when we open with those words, we are also cueing someone to think busy, crazy, stressed, terrible. And this happens a lot of times accidentally, where we don't even realize we're setting up these kind of negative cues right from the start of our interaction. So can you think about, is there something small and easy and positive you could say? So I've been so looking forward to this. I'm so happy to be here. Gosh, it's a beautiful day outside. We're going to end a wonderful day. I love your Zoom background. We love a group of people. These aren't complicated. They're not huge, long, praiseworthy, embarrassing openers. They're small ways that we start on a high. I also want you to think about this in terms of the questions you ask. So I think a lot of the times we'll say, oh, how are you? Or we meet someone for the first time. What do you do? Where are you from? The problem is those aren't negative. They're just autopilot. We've been asked those questions so many times that we don't even think about our answer. So instead, I want you to think about, is there something just slightly you can change? What's good? Working on anything exciting today? Have any fun plans coming up this weekend? A little sort of fun cue you can remember is, on Monday and Tuesdays, I always ask, did you do anything fun this past weekend? On Thursdays and Fridays, I always ask, do you have anything fun coming up this weekend? And on Wednesdays, I don't talk to anyone. So it's a very easy, no, I'm just joking. I do talk to people on Wednesdays. And that's when I usually say, what's good? Or working on anything exciting this week. So that's a little, but the day, that's how I always ask. But the people who interact with me a lot, by the way, they know that. Like, I'm very clear. I say, hey, kind of a funny thing is, I'm a recovering awkward person. So I'm always going to ask about your weekend. So save fun stuff for me. And now when my colleagues come in, they will tell me on a Monday or Tuesday, our team calls are on Tuesday, they will start off with, oh, Vanessa, I have something good for you. This weekend, I finally got my puppy, and they'll actually save up those things. So it is okay to be transparent with some of these cues. Like the more that we talk about these cues, that we're actually trying to leverage them to help people to be more charismatic, the more I think that we can get past that shallow autopilot. So how are you? Good, good. Busy, but good, right? I feel like now in these days, if you ask someone, how are you? There is one answer and it's, oh, busy, busy, good, but busy. Like that is the answer universally. Doesn't matter who I call, that seems to be always the answer. So if we can break that autopilot, we are all better served. Another autopilot thing that I see is introductions. So Laura meets Sarah. We have Sarah on the call. Here's that quick email intro to Sarah. Now, this is one that takes a few more words. That this is one that if we can dial up a little bit with our words, it does take more, but it is worth it. That if we can cue or use verbal cues to set people up for success. So Sarah is our wonderful head of marketing. She's been leading the team for 5 years, and we are lucky to have her. Those few more words are gifts. They are gifts to Sarah. They are gifts to Laura, who you're introducing them to, and they're also gifts to you. And by the way, a little note here is these should be easy. If you're working with people and you're like, yep, I can very easily write a 1 or 2 sentence positive introduction, great. If a little self-check, if you're working with people and you can't write a genuinely authentic positive introduction, it is time to build. It is time to build rapport. It's time to find out more about them. It is time to figure out how can you authentically and positively introduce them, because that will leak, right? Like our cues, it's hard to be inauthentic with our cues, right? It's hard to fake warmth. It's hard to fake competence. What we are assuming is good intention, that we have true warmth people and true competence, and that's what we're trying to show. So the more that you can use these to authentically test yourself, the better. It's a good opportunity to look in. I want to make a note here. So I know I've been talking a lot about being positive, and I love being positive, but I do believe in too much positivity. I do believe in toxic positivity. So this is not about being positive all the time. It is about being purposeful. Warm words, competent words are not necessarily positive. That if we think strategically about how we want to show up to interaction, that is not always positive, but it can be getting things done, competent, productive, powerful, or it can be warm, open, and trustworthy and collaborative. This is also really important if there is something negative going on. So if there's something negative going on, you especially don't want to meet that with overly positive or toxic positivity. But what we can do is we can use verbal cues, and I talk about this a lot in the book, to answer emotional needs. That if someone is in a problem or having a challenge or being frustrated or having a mistake, we can, what is the emotional answer for that? Well, when people are in a frustrating time or having a mistake, they want to hear solutions. They want to hear why they're not alone. So let's solve this. I hear you. Let's work together. We'll fix this. Let's find a solution. So it's also about matching the emotional need. And this is one of the more advanced ones, but matching the emotional need with what someone is coming to us. And that is the single best way to interact, that we are gifting the people we are with answering those emotional needs. Other way that you can think about this is we infect people with our warmth and competence, right? Our cues are contagious. So if you want someone to be warmer, call attention to their warmth, use more warm words. If you want someone to be competent, call attention to their competence. That when we have those words, it actually sets us up to be our more charismatic self. So I have a challenge for you that I would love for you to go through. So what I'd love for you to do after this session is I want you to open up your email sent folder. I want you to do a little email audit. So this is what we do in our lab. We're trying to figure out where someone falls in the charisma scale. Open up your email sent folder and pull up a recent important message. And then I want you to count how many warm words did you use and how many competent words did you use. Likely one of two things will happen. Either you'll have really a lot of warmth or really a lot of competence, or you'll find no cues at all. That you've removed all the cues from our actions. Remember that when we under cue or under signal, that puts us in the danger zone. That makes it hard for people to interact with us. A little note here, emojis, exclamation points. For all my emoji users, all my exclamation point users, this is highly, highly warm. So highly warm people use a lot of emojis and smiley faces, yays, whoops, fabs. That counts as one warm point. For all my competent folks, so percents, numbers, graphs, or charts, or dollar signs, those are all count as one competent word. So when you're using some counting, you got to count those other small symbolic cues as well. I wanted to